This is the fourth day of this July 2024 7-day sesshin, and we'll return to the teachings of Muso Kokushi, the Japanese Zen master of the 13th and 14th century, national teacher at the time, teacher of the emperor. And we're reading from a book called Dream Conversations on Buddhism and Zen, translated by Thomas Cleary. He says, there is a vast potential latent within human beings that remains undiscovered because of the limitations placed on consciousness by habitual preoccupations. The recommendation that all cravings be relinquished does not mean that detachment itself is a goal. It is a means of breaking through self-imposed restrictions and opening up this inexhaustible treasury of potential. Let's comment on that. So, the idea that we need to give up something with respect to diet or some pleasure is not, he's saying it's not because of it's essentially bad, but because it takes a toll on our consciousness, that we have less bandwidth, less energy available for things that will truly open us up. He uses the term habitual preoccupations. I think of our preoccupations with getting what we want and avoiding what we don't want. That's the biggest, probably. Our likes and dislikes, our preferences. We hear this in the Sung San's Affirming Faith in Mind, how much we can try to structure our lives around our likes and dislikes. It's natural that we have likes and dislikes, but to what extent do we go? When do they become real attachments, these likes and dislikes? And they start to rule our daily lives. Habitual preoccupations, such as being preoccupied with what others think of us. Habitual preoccupations, being preoccupied with how I compare to others. That's a big one in sesshin. It was for me. And sesshin, after all, is just a slice of life. Whatever we do out there, outside sesshin, we bring in with us. It's our mind, our habit energy, our habitual preoccupations. How we might compare to others, performance in sesshin. Oh, it's such a waste of mental energy to be concerned with that, and is itself an impediment. While we're thinking how we compare to others, that's reducing our effectiveness in sesshin. And then it's hard to compare in terms of habitual preoccupations with the preoccupations with the past, memories, what has happened, what we've said, what others have said to us, the past and the future, what we're going to do, what we hope to do, what we're going to say to others, what they might say to us, rehearsing, working over our scripts. These are some of the ones that I hear most about and have had plenty of experience in the past with those. People with obsessive-compulsive tendencies have their own specialized forms of habitual preoccupations in terms of just their daily functioning. Food, being preoccupied with food, in sesshin, outside sesshin. Is a means of breaking through self-imposed restrictions and opening up this treasury of potential. I used to never miss a meal in sesshin. When I was working on Mu, I would eat very, very little. My whole meal, would say dinner or would be about half a plate or sometimes less. But I would always go to a meal. I'm not going to miss a meal. And then Roshi Kapleau made some little talk about how it's good sometimes to just try to break up your routines, your rhythms. Just try something different, just to see what the effect that might have. So I was desperate enough to actually continue sitting in the zendo during dinner. This was on the last dinner of sesshin, Friday dinner of sesshin. And I was passed on Mu that night. Now, causation or just correlation? Who's to say? It's a way of getting out of your comfort zone. And having the if not courage, at least the interest, the curiosity to see, well, what if I change this? I wish I'd conducted one other experiment in those days, which was to try getting a full night's sleep, because I was completely obsessed with getting as little sleep as possible. Who knows, I might have been through Mu sooner if I'd gotten one decent night's sleep, or at least a night's sleep of more than 3 hours. So this is an encouragement to tinker a bit, try something, see what happens. He says, just as greed for worldly things is inhibiting and self-defeating, so also craving for otherworldly things prevents the opening of the mind. So it doesn't have to be materialistic things that where we crave, but craving peak experiences in sesshin. Something special, magical, something we can tell others about afterward or write about. Something exciting. Craving for some kind of psychic powers. I don't hear much about that, but that's a possibility, I suppose. But the biggest one, and arguably the biggest impediment, is the craving for enlightenment. Wait, I hear someone saying, wait a minute, what's wrong with having the aspiration to come to awakening for the sake of all beings? Well, nothing. That's wonderful to have that aspiration, but not as something we're holding in the mind as a goal that we're grasping at. It's the ultimate irony that people who have this aspiration, it's the most exalted aspiration a human being can have, I would suggest, that if it's held in the mind as a thought, an image of that enlightenment experience out there in the future, then we are blocking ourselves. So how do you, if you have this genuine longing to awaken, how do you not have it hang in the mind? Well, you put more of your mind, put all of your mind into the koan you're working on, or the breath, whatever your practice is. When you're really absorbed in the koan move, for example, the more thoroughly you get absorbed in it, the more you squeeze out of the mind any thought about enlightenment. You don't want that thought in there. Same with any koan or the breath. Get it out of there. Actually, you don't have to get it out. You don't have to expel it. You just become so one with the practice, there's no room left. It just sort of evaporates. It disappears. Goes off the margins, disappears from our screen. It requires such intense commitment to the koan. Sometimes we're pretty much almost entirely absorbed in the koan, but if you look closely in the back of the mind, just sort of skittering around in the back of the mind or just floating there, is still that idea of kensho. Okay, you're not absorbed enough in the koan. The genius of questioning is that to the degree that we're questioning, we won't be holding on to anything. You can't hold on to a thought, such as enlightenment. You can't hold on and question at the same time, that is, if you're really fully questioning. Questioning is the absence of holding on, attaching, clinging. When people are unsympathetic to you and the world does not go as you wish, this should be a help to detachment of feelings from the repetitive cycle of becoming and decay, gaining and losing. The world does not go as you wish. So you experience a loss, financial or loss of a job opportunity, or loss of someone close to you, breakup of a relationship. There's the opportunity to have the presence of mind to realize that loss is the result of gaining anything. So how can we just get past gain and loss? That's why one way to understand why the first of the Four Noble Truths is suffering. That's how we get started. That's what turns us in the direction of a path that will lead to the transcendence of worldly concerns. That will unchain us from this chain of causation. Gaining and losing, becoming and decay. I remember a quite close Dharma brother back in the 1970s who when his girlfriend broke up with him, that's what spurred him to commit to practice in a way he never had before. That's using pain in the best possible way. The withholding of divine aid from those who would become presumptuous, more attached, more indulgent, and more shameless if their wishes were fulfilled is itself divine aid to such people. In a corrupt age, when prayers are not answered, that itself is the answer. How much are we really helped by managing to get everything we want? What kind of condition is that for real inquiry or aspiration to get everything we want? I don't know about this. I've never collected any real data, but I suspect that among very wealthy people, there aren't as many who get serious about spiritual practice as those of lesser means. You're full, I suppose, with that kind of wealth. Or is it instead maybe the grasping for wealth, the prioritizing of materialistic things, what from the very beginning gets in the way of searching for something beyond that? Or if not wealth as such, other kinds of favorable karma, let's call it, beauty, great beauty, fame. Why search for something else when you, quote, have it all? I've always wondered about the whole matter of prayer, that is a petitionary prayer. Please give me this. Please do this for me. It's very different, of course, to pray for the sake of others, I suppose. And not to mention who it is you're praying to anyway. Someone said what most people are really asking for when they pray to God is that 2 and 2 not make 4. And then he switches to this. The pity that great sages have for ordinary people is not necessarily because of the wretchedness of the human condition in itself, but more because of the great potential humanity has and does not use, the high estate from which humanity has fallen. Potential. To see what students could realize, could do, could become. I don't know, the word pity I think is not a very good word. Compassion would be better. The ache of seeing every single person is endowed with this enlightened nature and not having realized it. And not doing the things that would enable them to realize it, and doing things that block them from doing it. The central benefit of Zen in the context of the ordinary ups and downs of life is not in preventing the minus and promoting the plus, but in directing people to the fundamental reality that is not under the sway of ups and downs. This is what we grow into through enough sesshins, is realizing that we can't stop the ups and downs, we can't stop the waves, the periods of hardship and ease that happen in sesshin, but we can get to the point where we realize that they're not permanent. They're nothing to make a lot out of when they're happening. That gradually we come to become familiar with the changeless that is behind all these changes. The blue sky that is behind the clouds, the shifting clouds. Turning a couple pages here, he says, one may enter into the sphere of influence of demons as a result of spiritual exercises and experiences. Again, for people who weren't hearing this yesterday, demons is just a 14th century way of talking about states of mind. This may be likened to the case of a warrior who is rewarded for achievement in battle, then develops an exaggerated sense of self-importance as a result of that reward. When a person, this is more to the point here, when a person takes pride in spiritual practices or experiences, that individual is certain to fall into the sphere of influence of demons. This is not the fault of the practice itself, but of the attitude of the practitioner. Those who undertake spiritual practices with wrong ideas or develop wrong ideas in the course of practice, and those who become conceited and oppose the doctrines or methods of others, enters states of mind and modes of being that may be referred to as hell. A man once came to Zen Master Hakuin and said, "Is there really a heaven and hell?" And Hakuin, in a flash, sized up this was a samurai, sorry. He sized up this samurai and he said, "Well, who's asking? Who are you? You look like the lowest form of humanity, a beggar, nothing I should bother." And now the samurai's face flushed and he reached for his sword. And he said, "That is hell." And then the samurai understood his meaning, and so he sheathed his sword and bowed to Hakuin, and Hakuin said, "And that is heaven." We don't have to imagine some places underground or up in the heaven. It's all here. We consign ourselves to hell or to heaven based on our reactivity in the world, the emotional states we get into, and beyond that also some terrible circumstances we can fall into. Many people, many millions of people live in hellish conditions. And then he builds on this further about the how we can fall under the spell of demons as a result of spiritual exercises and experiences. He takes up the 6 paramitas. The 6 paramitas are the qualities that we develop through spiritual practice. It's a big category in Buddhist philosophy, the 6 paramitas, and we'll get to them as he speaks here. A sutra called Obstacles of Pure Action explains how religious practices can in fact obstruct the path of enlightenment. Okay, what does he mean? He says this occurs, and first he takes up the first paramita, paramita of giving, generosity. This occurs when those who practice almsgiving, charity, despise the selfish. And he looks at morality, the second of the paramita. When those who observe moral precepts are critical of those who do not. And he takes up the paramita of forbearance or patience. When those who practice forbearance belittle the impatient. And then the next paramita, vigor. When those who practice vigorous diligence look down on the lazy. And then the next is concentration, the 5th paramita. When those who practice meditation reject the distracted. And then knowledge. In this case, it's prajna, but in this case, he's defining it as knowledge rather than wisdom. And when those with knowledge make light of the ignorant. So this devilish, let's call it devilish, part of our mind is always ready to appropriate for itself what it can, even when we are practicing what seem to be virtuous acts. This is kind of self-evident, but I'll read it. It's talking about ordinary insights that we have in the course of Sei Sesshin. A primary aim of Zen is the uncovering of what is known as inherent wisdom. This is not the kind of knowledge that is produced by thinking based on conditioned consciousness. It is said that the ignorant are obstructed by ignorance, while intellectuals are obstructed by intellectual knowledge. One way of getting past these obstacles and approaching inherent wisdom is to let go of whatever comes to mind. There it is. That's Sesshin. Let go, discard, discard, discard. Whatever it is, discard it. Discard it. Wonderful insight you have about whatever, your parents, or your spouse or your children, discard it. No wonder so few people are really cut out for this work. Instead of just savoring it, maybe writing about it, telling other people about it, discard, out. This is how we keep moving, how we keep progressing. Demands a lot of us as human beings. We don't want to let these things go that are confirming. But just a little bit more about that. The effect, it's not wasted. We're not expelling it. It's that once we've had the insight, whatever it may be, that's part of us. When I say discard, of course, I discard the thought of it, the memory of it. It's already part of us when we've experienced it. We don't have to cling to it in the mind. Here's a different topic. He says, when you are ill, if you think you have to study medical science before getting treatment for your illness, you will get sicker and die before you ever finish learning medicine. If you go to an expert physician, however, the physician can diagnose your ailment and prescribe accordingly. As a patient, you may not understand the knowledge underlying the doctor's prescription, but if you follow expert advice, you will get well. Buddhist practice is also like this. If you try to learn all the doctrines first and then apply them, you might spend a whole lifetime studying the doctrines without learning them all, so many and diverse are they. If you never get around to application, learning is ultimately useless. This is very Zen emphasis. Rather than learning, what we want to do is unlearn. We want enough understanding of Zen principles and instructions and practical instructions to do it. But once we've got that, once we know how to do it, once we have the path, once we've reached the path, then this is much better to go with the direct experience through meditation. Real teachers, therefore, give students only as much instruction as they need to apply. Even if the students cannot understand immediately, if they keep the directions of the teacher in mind, without trying to fit them into preconceived interpretations, when the appropriate time arrives, the obscurity should dissolve. Once read a book called Zen and the Bible. I'd never read. I still haven't read the Bible, but I thought I'll read about it at least. What one thing, the thing that stuck most in mind, the one thing from that book, was he was talking about the difference between Westerners and Asians in terms of accepting authority. He said that Westerners have to be convinced. We have to be convinced of why it makes sense before we do it. All right, make your case. Make your case as to why we should do prostrations. Make your case as to why we should sit. It's a general tendency, of course. There's a range of different ways this plays out. Whereas Asians are more likely to just accept it and do it with the faith that it'll work. That in the doing of it, let's say prostrations, I wasn't the only one who had trouble with that in the beginning. Just in doing the prostrations, giving it a chance, doing it long enough, that we come to embody the wisdom behind it. When we plant a tree, as long as the roots take, the branches and leaves will naturally grow and the flowers and fruits will develop. Therefore, when we plant the tree, we are concerned about the roots, not about the branches and leaves. As long as the roots have not taken a firm hold, we prune off the small branches so that the energy will go to the roots. Yeah, this is a wonderful metaphor. The root, from a Zen point, the root is no mind, is the practice of no mind. Practice of Zazen, let's say. Not just sitting, but in everything we do of applying that and not clinging to anything. The branches and leaves or something else. We'll get to that. Then he says, that does not mean, however, that we plant the tree for the sake of the roots alone. We take great care with the roots for the sake of the branches, leaves, flowers, and fruits. So there's the fundamental, the root practice of no mind. I don't want to say sitting, because that's just one aspect of this no mind practice, this practice of concentration and mindfulness, this practice of discarding, really. That's the root, discarding. The branches, leaves, flowers, and fruits are all of these secondary things we know from the tradition of Zen, the prostrations, chanting, bows, and even aside from Zen practice itself, other things that support the root practice, diet, health, reading, some reading that inspires one to sit. After realizing the essence of Zen, people in ancient times used to spend decades polishing themselves thoroughly in order to free themselves from compulsions of conditioning and habit. This is called the work of maturation. The completion of maturation is called the attainment of unification, or say it's called integration. Change that to integration. So there's the realization, let's say the Kensho, the awakening, But then that has to be integrated into all of one's life and habits and previous reactivity to things, so it really becomes embodied. So many, a number of koans where the master has this tremendous deep enlightenment and is still kind of a jerk afterward at first. And then you pick up, 100 koans later, and they're like pussycats, just sweet and refined, kind and gentle. No one more so than the great Joshu. He didn't start teaching till he was 80, they say. He had his first awakening at the age of 18, and then what they say was full enlightenment at the age of 56, but still didn't begin teaching till he was 80. One of the very distinctive things about Joshu and the koans is his gentility, his softness. In the beginning, when he was still 18, I think this was his initial awakening, he was just all torqued up to get that enlightenment. Get it, I gotta get it. And he goes to Nansen, and says, how do I get it? And Nanchuan says basically, well, the more you try to get it, in other words, what I was saying earlier this hour, the more you've got it, you're grasping at it in your mind, the farther away you go from it. And then the young Joshu says, well, if I don't try, how am I going to do it? And Nansen, who was much older himself at that point, he quietly says, it's not a matter of doing or not doing. It's more, and I'm filling in here, it's more becoming this original nature, this original enlightenment, growing into it, harmonizing with it, not as a Olympic event to master. And then after Joshu's words, or after Nansen's words, Joshu came to his first awakening. Our time is up. We'll stop and recite the 4 vows.